Welcome. You've heard the ground rules. We're assuming that all council members have read the budget book materials, and we're going to go 15 minutes. So we'll go to I'm not sure I can do 4:51 at the latest, and go ahead and have an opening statement. Then we'll take questions.
Great. Thank you, Chair and committee members. I'd like to begin by thanking our arts partners and commissioners. I'm sorry, what's that?
I think somebody didn't have their themselves muted. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Joining me on the call today are Commission Chair Mary Elena Ramos, Finance and Operations Director Ian Myers, and Strategic Funding and Initiatives Manager Janine Cristiano. And earlier I was saying thank you to our arts partners listening in and our commissioners who are listening in as well today. We understand the position the city's budget is in and appreciate your leadership and the need to make major adjustments. We are collectively facing an unprecedented time, and our partner artists and organizations have been hit especially hard by the 1-2 punch of the March 3rd tornado and the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. This pandemic has meant closed museums, canceled seasons, and furloughed workers, among other devastating losses. And even in the face of adversity and uncertainty, Nashville's artists and arts organizations are resilient. They have created spaces to share virtual cultural programs, performances, and lessons, hosted improv workshops on Zoom to keep us laughing, and they've even developed arts curriculum to share and support our Metro School students. At a time when we are all physically separated and socially isolated, they've inspired us with their poetry, their songs, and their beautiful work. And as artists have done across the ages, they remind us of our shared humanity. Tattoo and fine artist Alicia Mrozik had to close her shop, Queen Bee Inc., after the March 22nd stay-at-home order. Her shop is the main source of her family's income, and this is after the tornado destroyed the neighborhood surrounding her shop. With Metro Arts Thrive funds, she was able to receive a stipend to design a Nashville Strong coloring and activity book that families can print at home to learn, have fun, and be inspired. And printed copies will be distributed with M&PS food boxes. Alicia said recently, "Art is essential to our culture, even if it's not an essential business. Without art bringing us together, especially in this period of social isolation, it would be a pretty bad place." Graphic artist Xavier Payne created a series of billboards to inspire the community. In the words of another cultural icon and poet, "Keep your head up" is seen at 10 feet tall and 22 feet long, rising over East Nashville's still devastated Main Street. Our artists and cultural institutions are not only core to Nashville's brand, they are part of its very heart and soul. Our cultural institutions employ artists, drive tourism, and generate revenue. They inspire civic pride and connectivity. You've seen the economic impact numbers in the previously submitted materials. About 70% of our entire operating budget goes right back out to the community in the form of grants to arts and cultural nonprofits. We know from surveying our partner organizations that a 50% cut in those grants will impact nearly 200 jobs immediately, resulting in the elimination of direct services to Nashvillians, and the reduction will inequitably and disproportionately affect smaller organizations and our most vulnerable populations. At least 4 of these organizations would be forced to close. We're open to creative solutions to this reduction because the arts are such a large part of what's made Nashville a resilient city, made us Nashville strong, and they will help us pull through this time too. Following the flood of 2010, the most poignant memory many Nashvillians have is when the symphony performed a free concert on the public square, even while their home was still flooded. The symphony's president, Alan Valentine, said at the time, "Music has great power to help people find solace and hope for the future." The Nashville Symphony, which gave us so much hope and inspiration after the flood 10 years ago, will be forced to lay off more than 130 employees on June 30th without additional federal assistance. The workers and employers in the arts and cultural nonprofit sector are your neighbors, your friends, and the citizens of this county. More broadly, they are the people who help make Nashville Music City and the Athens of the South. In closing, I'd like to share the words of our youth poet laureate, Alora Young. "Disasters make us remember what we fight for, what we live for. Nashville will never run out of possibilities." Thank you for your ongoing support. We're happy to take your questions at this time.
Thank you, Director Vincent. All right, Councilmember Suara.
Thank you, Chair. I was trying to unmute myself. It's a very tough one to read your questionnaire and to see the programs being called, especially the ones that have to do with racial equity and minority programming. I have two questions. The first one, I wanted to know if you are aware if the CARES Act will cover any of this shortage in your budget.
Sure. We have applied for some funding from the National Endowment for the Arts, but that's only a $50,000 grant if we get it, which has to go to support, I think those are mainly to support salaries or other, lost wages. We may receive some additional funding from the Tennessee Arts Commission that's, flowing through the federal government, but we have not, I'm not aware of other funds that would be specifically for the arts. I do have a conversation I've started with the mayor's office about this to see if there's other federal relief funds that could, possibly plug this particular budget reduction, but I don't know at this time.
Thank you. The second question that I have for you relates to the financial itself. There is a line for professional and purchase services where I believe that there's no money there for FY21, but the budget appears to have a negative $863,000, and I was wondering, does that mean even if you don't have an amount budgeted, you will still be paying in that category? It was just something that jumped out at me, and I was just wondering why a negative budget for that line item.
That is a good question. Ian Myers, I don't know if you want to pipe in. I think sometimes they pull out the grants that we may be receiving in the future as a negative number, and then they're added back in.
That's correct. They usually reduce our previous year's grants. The FY20 grants would be reduced. Well, yeah, looking at the budget book, it looks like
this is a professional and purchase services line.
It looks like that's where they're taking out the 50% reduction. That's the only thing that we would have at that amount of money.
Okay. It seems like what we have is more than, if someone can just, I can follow up later if there's a breakdown, but it just seems that we have, it's almost as if we're going to be, I don't even know how to explain it, just doesn't, I couldn't figure out what that negative is. And I still don't understand what the negative means. So
Councilmember,
that would be yes.
Councilmember, in the interest of time, I've asked Mr. Cooper to have Maria from our office follow up with you and the Arts Commission to make sure we get this answered fully and get the answer online for everybody. Okay?
Yes, thank you. And I hope that there might be other civilian or local money, or maybe there might be more money coming from the CARE Act, because I do hope that the programming that you do, especially on minority, I hope that we get funding for it. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Porterfield.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you guys so much for the work that you've been doing. I also appreciate that you highlighted the work that you guys do with at-risk students and talking about how the loss in the revenue that you guys receive, how that can have a negative impact on public safety and supporting our at-risk students. So thank you so much for including that. My question is, you spoke about it a little bit here, and it's also in the questionnaire. Can you expound a little bit more about the 200 nonprofit arts jobs that would face immediate elimination, as well as the 7,000 to 8,000 jobs that would be impacted by the cut? So that seemed like a really large number, and I just needed a little clarification on that, please. Thank you.
Sure. So we surveyed our grantee organizations a couple of weeks ago after we found out about this reduction, and basically the question was how will jobs be impacted by this reduction of 50%, and that is the number that they came back with, was just under 200 jobs that would be immediately impacted. And then the other number is more of an economic impact number, so taking the reduction in services and the performances and the things that these organizations may or may not be doing in the next year, sort of extrapolated beyond just the immediate direct jobs that we fund. So that's more of a larger impact number.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gamble.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, Councilwoman Porterfield asked the question I had. Let me ask a follow-up to that. Do you anticipate these law positions permanent, or is the possibility that if funding was restored, positions would be restored?
That is a good question. I would imagine if funding was restored, that some of these positions could be restored. I don't imagine that they're permanent losses. And of course, some of the people may move on, and it's certainly hard to get back, skilled people who work in these fields if they've moved on. But I do think if funding was to come back, that these positions could be reinstated.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember Van Rees.
Yes, Chair. I had a question that a constituent asked me today regarding the 1% funds for public art and whether or not there's any opportunity for a kind of a one-time acquisition of some of those funds, or if that was considered capital, if it can be accessed for operating just for for this budget year only, whether or not anything in the works with public arts has been jeopardized at all based on this budget and the circumstances.
And I'm going to let Mr. Cooper take the first shot at that question.
The council member, those funds can only be used for capital arts projects. They could not be redirected for anything operating budget-wise.
And I could speak to, if it's okay, we do have a couple of programs that we're developing right now that would include an acquisition of local artists' work and some other things that we have in the works around utilizing those public art funds to immediately help local artists and businesses.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Glover.
Thank you, Chair. So very quickly, because when I look in the budget book, you don't have 200 positions that are paid for, not certain exactly how it works. So I think my question would be simply this. Of the 200 positions you said that would be lost due to the cuts, are those full-time positions? Why did they not show up in the budget book? Not sure how to ask the question completely, but it doesn't seem to make sense to me because they're not reflected in the budget book. Thank you, Chair.
Sure. So these are not Metro positions. These are positions that are within our arts and culture sector that we fund through our grants budget. So this is the impact of not having those dollars going out into the community will impact these jobs that we're talking about. So they're not exactly, Metro jobs.
So how many of them are full-time that'll be affected?
Those are full-time equivalents. So it's a mixture of full-time, part-time contract, but added up together, it was about, just under 200 full-time equivalent positions.
And how much money does that represent on 200 positions?
This is the impact of losing our 50% of our grants budget, which is about $1.2 million.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other council members have a question for the Arts Commission?
Chair, just to reiterate, that's 200 hard jobs and approximately 8,000 additional jobs lost by removing that $1.2 million. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I think you're understanding it correctly. I think, well, editorialize. Yes, it's clear that the loss of the funding impacts a variety of nonprofits, as the director mentioned. I think common sense would indicate that the smaller the recipient, the more dramatic the impact. And she told us that they did a survey of the organizations they provide funding for, and came back at 200 full-time equivalent positions impacted by the loss of funding. And I know this always gets long conversation in the council every year, because the pound for pound spending happens all over the county and impacts a lot of people's districts with arts organizations that enhance the quality of life in neighborhoods every day all over the county. And I know it drives a lot of conversation every year. We have run out of the allotted time. If there are additional questions, please use that Q&A function at the bottom right for council members, or email questions to the council office, and we'll get the detailed information out to everybody and on the website. In the meantime, I'd like to thank Director Vincent and her entire board of volunteer citizens who help make Nashville a better place through the arts every day, every week. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, next we move on to Metro Water. Mr. Potter, are you on?